Tomé peyote en México, en la montaña, y dispuse de un paquete que me hizo permanecer 2 o 3 días entre los tarahumaras. Pensé entonces, en aquel momento, que estaba viviendo los 3 días más felices de mi vida. Había cesado de aburrirme, de buscar una razón a mi vida y de tener que cargar mi cuerpo. Comprendía que estaba inventando la vida, que esta era mi función y mi razón de ser, y que me aburría cuando había perdido la imaginación. Y el peyote me la daba. Y el peyote me la daba. Un ser se adelantó y de un golpe hizo salir el peyote de mí. Con él hice carne picada real y el cadáver de un hombre fue despedazado y lo encontraron despedazado en algún lugar. Dudo que este mundo no es el inverso del otro, y mucho menos su mitad. Este mundo también es una maquinaria real, cuya palanca de mando poseo. Es una fábrica verdadera, cuya clave es el humor nato.
Good afternoon. This was the Soundwalk Collective with Patti Smith from the album The Peyote Dance, in which they retraced the journey to Mexico from Anthony Artaud and to Mexico to have a peyote ceremony. And we probably come back to this, but with this music we wanted to welcome you to this ceremony. We tried to make some set and setting, very important terms in the psychedelic revival, also in other forms of psychedelics. Welcome. My name is Patricia Pisters. I'm just here now to welcome you. Can you maybe go to the first slide? I'm going to introduce you to the moderator, but just really welcome you also by addressing the 2 themes that probably, most of you are maybe coming either for Deleuze and Guattari or for the psychedelic revival or both. And what we're going to do, we composed a special issue on the relationship between the philosophies of Deleuze and Guattari and psychedelics. And you see them here. They look a little bit like hippies on a holiday. But their work has been associated in the 1960s with psychedelics. They did write about it, although not that much. But their own philosophy in itself is quite hallucinatory, and we will try to talk about a few of these elements. But I'm going to introduce you to our moderator today, Dirk Vis. I'm very happy you're here. Dirk is a writer. He writes fiction, non-fiction, scripts, poetry in Dutch and English. He is also an editor of De Gids, the literary magazine, Dutch literary magazine. And De Gids last year published, together with their online version, the Internet Gids, DIG, a special issue on psychedelics called Good Trip, Bad Trip. And so I'm very, very happy, Dirk, that you are here, and you will going to talk us through the setup and moderate the session. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for introducing me. Thank you for inviting me to this evening as the moderator. I will take you through the evening. Indeed, the special issue of tonight is laying over there. The issue of the Gids, there are just a few copies left for my personal stash. They're also over there. They're both for sale. The articles we will be talking about, you will be able to read them online if you take one of these cards or take a picture of the last slide of this evening. I wanted to start by saying that as an art student, I read Deleuze and Guattari, or I should say I tried, because after the introduction, it made me cry. It was so powerful, I had to put it away for later. I'm still waiting for the right moment, by the way. I did enjoy very much reading your articles. I told it to some of you before. There's wonderful cross-sections happening if you read the various articles, the way the journal is built up. And I was surprised by the creative and the speculative potential of the texts. And so I hope you'll all be able to read them later on. I should also mention that you have seen, maybe when you entered, on the screen a short clip called Tlecaxitl by Colectivo Los Ingravidos, and they are a Mexican collective, currently artists in focus at the International Film Festival in Rotterdam. And we will be seeing another clip of theirs at the middle of tonight's program. I will start by introducing the speakers and asking them a few questions about their article. Then we will watch this short clip all together. And then we'll have a conversation here on stage and hopefully also with you. We don't have too much time. We will try to stop at 6:30 because then they're going to kick us out. Okay, so I wanted to start with Daan, because you are also the first in the issue. Lazy can be good. There must be a reason why Patricia put your text in the beginning of the article, so we're going to start with you too. I should also put the right. This is yours?
Yes.
You recognize this?
I recognize it, yes.
Does it have anything, like, okay, so I read their articles and I have questions of my own, but they also wanted to first start with something that you really need to get off of the tip of your tongue. What does it mean when we say matter or psychedelics have agency?
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Dirk, as first speaker. I mean, what I tried to do in my article, which then became setting the stage for the journal, is take Deleuze and Guattari, take the new materialism that can be derived from that, and take that as a new lens to look at psychedelics. So what do we talk about when we talk about psychedelics? I mean, ultimately we're talking about plants, we're talking about fungi, we're talking about molds, or we're talking about mushrooms, or we're talking about cactuses. But weirdly enough, the psychedelic revival often is about, for example, MDMA. I think that's controversial, right? And there's very little research to, for example, mescaline, which is the cactus. For very complicated reasons, we can go in about that on the Q&A. But I always say, I mean, for me, the real psychedelics would be ayahuasca, DMT, LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline. So MDMA for me is somewhere on the edge. But it's became very central in the revival because we have now looked at psychedelics as something you can take to cure something or to improve or to get better either spiritually or mentally or in your life or maybe in terms of functioning, etc. And in my article, I argued against this sort of functionalism. So my shaman, my ayahuasca shaman, says, is it you who wants to take the ayahuasca or is it the ayahuasca who wants to take you, right? And normally we put this sort of the psyche, the ego, I want this. I want to be better. I want to be free. I take this drug, and then my mind starts tripping. I get into this mystical experience, whatever. So what we miss, I think, the agency of the psychedelics is that maybe it is actually these plants, these fungi, these mushrooms that want something from us. And it's just us who think that we are doing this and we are active because that's how we've been trained to do it. But it's actually a material encounter between these organisms which reached out to us. And that has also been my attempt to take more indigenous perspectives on psychedelics more seriously, looking at the event, us coming together. It's about community with the plants, being in an assemblage together, experiencing things together in a material way as an encounter.
Okay, I have way too many questions. So I'm just going to start with, I hope we get to some of them at least during these talks, and maybe also later. Deleuze and Guattari say there is becoming cactus, becoming fungus. You mentioned MDMA is on the verge. Is there also something like becoming chair, or becoming car, or becoming computer?
You ask me? Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, psychedelics are objects of which it's very easy to see that they have agency. It's easier to see that ayahuasca brew has agency than the chair has agency. But yeah, it opens us up to becoming thing. Yes, so yes.
Mm-hmm. You say you have a shaman, ayahuasca shaman. I've read and learned from ayahuasca shamans that they can see what they do as a form of study. You've studied psychedelics now for I don't know how long. I also forgot to introduce you. I will do so at the end of this round when I also introduce Amir. You say so. You learn from him. Do you think that we could ever get to a point where we think giving psychedelics their agency? Could we ever see this as a field of study in itself, not just the context, but doing it?
You mean that? So learning from the plants as a legitimate study, like academic study, that we're really going to take ayahuasca as professors.
Yeah, I mean, I read one of your articles. I forgot which one. I read it was seen as minor sciences.
Yes, of course. I mean, there is definitely a sort of emancipatory movement going on. I think that everybody who is engaged with psychedelics would feel that, but it does. Open up epistemological challenges, to put it in simpler words. What knowledge, what is important knowledge, and how is knowledge produced? And I've also pointed out in my article this risk of reversed Orientalism. I don't want to say, it's the shaman and the indigenous people, they know it so much better because they're so connected to the earth. I also think that's a pitfall. But the challenge is, how do we really get a diverse epistemological perspective and epistemological practices together within the current institutions, outside of current institutions, and psychedelics do offer, I think, a very tools, and Deleuze and Guattari offers tools to reimagine this.
Yeah. So, in line with that, do you think? I mean, that's a beautiful answer. In line with it, do you think, with these various epistemologies, do you think that there also are limits to our advancement in understanding psychedelics?
I mean, if you ask me, I mean, I'm a religious studies scholar, and I would say there's no limits, right? But yeah, it's of course important to be modest about what you do when you produce knowledge. And I think every good academic should ask themselves that. And I think there is a crisis in the humanities about what is this knowledge production for, right? And now we have all these answers about inclusivity or diversity, so that becomes then the master narrative to understand these knowledges. But we need to be more creative. We have to expect from each other as on the quest for knowledge, to be creative in this question: what are we really doing when we're doing it? I didn't know it was going to be so epistemological. I always wanted to talk.
That's just with you. The rest is going to be way more fun. This is Daan Oostveen. He is lecturer in New Humanities, Comparative Religion. He also already mentioned it, Post-Human Philosophy at Utrecht University. Also the author of the forthcoming book, rhizomatic belonging on multiple religious allegiances. Then I want to move to Amir, sitting right next to you. Not next in the magazine, if I remember correctly. And I will not forget to introduce you, Amir. Oh, yes, thank you very much. You see, there's multitasking. Yeah, that's good. It's yours. Amir Voetga is assistant professor film, AI, and posthumanism at Media Studies Department here in Amsterdam. He's also the director of the Sounds of Silence Festival and the Altered States Festival. I think it's currently on in The Hague, right?
It's in 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, it's in The Hague, and there's flyers there.
Flyers there. There are some amazing artists on the flyer I already saw, so I hope you all have the opportunity to go. Amir, could you say something about the spiritual dimension of psychedelics?
I can try. So that's an aspect of my article that I thought would be nice to flesh out. It's mainly about film, cinema, but there's that aspect of film and the psychedelic experience according to Deleuze and Guattari. And then when we ask what is the spiritual experience of psychedelics, of course it depends on what is the substance involved and the set and the setting. So I don't know if you're tripping on acid in a trance party or in an ayahuasca ceremony, or taking shrooms alone in your room, you probably would have very different experiences and different spiritual experiences. But Deleuze and Guattari are very useful for us scholars in the field as they provide some common features that are very interesting to consider. And two of the things that they do that I want to highlight briefly, first of all, they switch the focus of our attention from the content of the experience to its form or its mode. So on the level of what they call percepts and affects. And second of all, they explain the sometimes vague, elusive spiritual dimension in a way that is not religious and is also very remote from New Age discourses that also can be quite vague, and in a way they, although very complicated, they pull it down to earth. So from this perspective, the spiritual dimension of psychedelics or the psychedelic experience should not be understood as kind of a kingdom, beyond life, some heaven above, but as a realm that is immanent to life. This is something that goes on throughout their different texts. It's something that a predecessor of them, Henri Bergson, described as the élan vital, the vital impetus of life itself. So for them, the spiritual dimension is right here. It's intertwined with life itself. And from this perspective, we can think of the spiritual dimension. They offer, for example, to think about it as a dimension of time that is not subordinated to matter and the kind of cause and effect Newtonian physics we have, but something that actually a time that is not subordinated to matter, but has a realm of its own, and they speak of durations in that sense. And I think those of us who had psychedelic experiences know very well the experience of time slowing down very much or accelerating very much. And for them, that would be a perception of duration that is below or above ordinary human perception. So that's a way to approach the spiritual dimension that is not necessarily speaking in vague terms. Now, if we follow Deleuze and Guattari, again, it's not about the content, it's not about what you see. So you maybe encounter gods or aliens or forest creatures, it doesn't really matter because it's more the way they approach it. It is about how you perceive, how you see, how you perceive, and not about the content of it. So, for example, an experience that is shared, a common experience is shared among different psychedelic experiences, is this kind of ego melting, something that, yes?
We are, because also I have way too many questions for you, for all of you. Ego melting, I'm just going to stop you right there. How does it feel? I have two very short questions because over the time. They are related, I think, or they might be. How does it feel to finish the sentences of Deleuze and Guattari and to continue with your own? I thought your contribution was very poetic. And you haven't said anything about Vincent Moon right now. How is it to watch an hour of Vincent Moon?
So I think Vincent Moon is a good example of a kind of something akin to psychedelic experience in the sense that he's using cinematic language. It's not about what you see. It's not necessarily that sometimes you see ayahuasca ceremonies and stuff like that in his videos, in his short films, but sometimes not. So it's not about the content, it's about his techniques. So I compare that to a movement, a cinematic movement, if you like, of the transcendental cinema and those directors like Ozu or Dreyer or Tarkovsky that use techniques such as very long takes or irrational cuts that actually do something with our perception, kind of squeezing our consciousness into a place that for Paul Schrader it's kind of moving into another dimension.
I hope we can go more into that later. How is it to ego melt with Deleuze and Guattari?
Great.
Okay, yeah, cool. Erika Biolcini, next in the line, lecturer of film and media culture at the Department of Media Studies, University of Amsterdam. She works on a PhD project on psychedelic aesthetics and relational healing practices. And you're going to tell us about... Oh, next slide, sorry, yes. This is yours? Is this from Blueberry? Yeah. You're going to say something about the psychedelic crystal.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying a few words about how I came across, or like how I created the act of creation of the psychedelic crystal first. So the psychedelic crystal is a sort of like conceptualization of what Deleuze defines as the crystals of time, or the crystal image in the time image, which is his second book on cinema. And basically what he says is that after the Second World War, the cinematic images have experienced a sort of ontological change, in the sense of from the movement image, so when there is a sort of linear narrative of movement and action, after the Second World War, we experience more time, also what Amir was pointing towards as well. So, for example, in some of the cinema, of the images of the time image, so for example, Roberto Rossellini, the War trilogy, so in Germania No Zero, Paisa, and also Roma Città Aperta, Deleuze says that the characters and the figures don't see action, but they see time. And especially the coexistence of the temporalities of present and past, or actually following Henri Bergson, the virtual and the actual. So the crystal image becomes for Deleuze the sort of point of indiscernibility of the past and present. And when I was reading the text, when I was also following Patricia's course on film and psychedelics, I came across this very beautiful quote from the time image that says, "Salvation can come only from the past which are preserved in the virtual." So there I was really thinking about, okay, so what is the connection between the crystal image, the past which are preserved in the virtual, and salvation and psychedelics as well. And here I started to create a bit more the concept of the psychedelic crystal, which is a dimension, aesthetic dimension of the time image, which opens the possibility for healing through the experience of arts, for example, but of the characters themselves as well. So here, for example, we have a screenshot from Blueberry, which is a film, an acid western, directed by Jan Konen, a Dutch director, in 2004. And here we are quite literally into the psychedelic crystal of the character, in the sense of Vincent Cassel is just took ayahuasca in this ceremony, and is traveling into the layers of the temporalities of his past, his traumatic past that is completely unable to remember. And here we see how the recollection of what he couldn't remember before actually has the potentiality and the possibility for healing. So I would say that the psychedelic crystal, on the one hand, is a sort of experimentation on the level of concept and also on the level of aesthetics as well.
Thank you. So this is from the Blueberry film, which is an acid western. That's really awesome. Do you think that they designed it or decided to make it intentionally with what you describe in mind? You think the film was made with that intention?
Yeah, I think this was actually a visualization of also what Jan Konen experienced himself. He wrote this book, Visionary Ayahuasca, which is a trip report, a personal trip report of his own experience in the Amazon. He traveled for a very long time, and he experienced different kind of ceremonies with different shamans in the Amazon, and he took... He participated in many different ceremonies with ayahuasca. So I think that here we also see kind of, not the same probably, but what he was going through or experiencing.
And you think he also intended for it to be more than just representation? For it to also really have an effect on the viewer?
Yeah. Yeah, so here it's not really on the level of content, on the level of representation, but it's also, again, what Amir was saying is really about the affective and perceptive experience of the viewer as well. So we really have to come here in the experience as open to what we're going to experience in the same way as during the psychedelics experience as well.
Last question, and then we have to move already, but I'm happy to get this question in, also because we're going to see something in the little break. In order for this, what you describe as psychedelic crystal, to have effect, you write that it needs something from the viewer. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could say what it is that it needs from the viewer and how you can get that ready.
Yeah, well, this is also what I was just saying about the opening to the experience as well, in the sense of not expecting that you're going to go out of the experience in a certain way, but just open to the images and what the images can do to you, to your body, to the senses, and also in relation to the audience and the different components of the audience as well.
Surrender. Yeah, please.
Just based on my conversation with Vincent Moon, for him it was not so much to give you some input, but to actually let you go inside yourself and put your output to the screen. So that's maybe also a different state of mind while watching these kind of films.
Yeah, thank you. Next, Mark Tuters. New slide. This is yours?
Yeah.
Does it actually exist?
What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I wish. Before we start, you're assistant professor new media culture at the Department of Media Studies in University of Amsterdam. You write on radical subcultures online and are affiliated with the Digital Method Initiative. What is weird mediation?
Okay. First of all, this image is a found image that was made by prompt. Although it's very convincing, I think.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Lego wouldn't do it, but otherwise it's awesome.
I wanted to use this image because I think that it really sort of speaks on a number of levels to what I suppose I find interesting and useful in Deleuze and Guattari's thought when trying to get your head around the idea of psychedelia. But I would, since I'm not a religious studies scholar, I'm a media studies scholar, I'm not a film studies scholar, I'm a new media scholar. I was kind of interested in this article and with this phrase, weird mediation, of trying to think about psychedelia in the etymological sense, a bit more kind of generally, like so in the sense of revealing the psyche, and to try to think about that in relation to contemporary technology, to ask whether there is perhaps a psychedelic dimension to stuff like this, which I think there is. And so I tried to sort of work that through in this text, and I was particularly, I think that Deleuze and Guattari offer resources there. I was particularly interested in Guattari's thought. I think that sometimes he gets a little short shrift, and he seems to me the particularly psychedelic one, actually.
It may be true. You can hear about Deleuzian, but Guattarian you somehow find less. And I don't know what either of them means. Maybe we can get into that later. So when does mediation get weird?
I think that the way that I ended up with that phrase was from reading Eric Davis's book High Weirdness. Yeah. And he wrote a PhD on weirdness. There was a short passage which I maybe can remember that came from Guattari's Chaosmosis, which is the last book he wrote. I think he kind of continued to work on a lot of the themes that the two of them were working on subsequent to that, whereas Deleuze kind of went back to work on his biographies and things like that. This passage was something like machines of logic and computation lie at the heart of human subjectivity. And I thought that was a really interesting thought, that there's this kind of recursive relationship between subjectivity and machines, where machines can kind of shape our subjectivity, but they can also sort of lie at the very core of it. And this is a very particular idea of machines, which I think is not. They spend a lot of time working through that idea, and Guattari actually has this beautiful phrase that he uses for one of his books, maybe his strangest book, the machinic unconscious, which I find really inspiring.
The machinic unconscious? Yeah. That sounds really good. You wrote somewhere, maybe it was a quote by somebody else. I'm not an academic, so I don't know. New media as machines for capturing and producing desire. I felt that was really beautiful. And I was wondering if you see kids watching an hour and a half of straight TikTok, is that psychedelic?
I think TikTok is totally weird. Yeah. That idea of capture is also, I think, kind of an important one. So that's quite central to their thinking, that there's this kind of vital thing that gets captured. And so for me, Guattari is especially helpful because he's more like a kind of a semiotician. And so he has this idea, he has these ideas about how, you'd asked before, like, what is it to become a chair? Yeah. But there is this kind of idea of material semiotics, where you can have, like, actions can be grammatized by these kind of encounters with, objects. And so I think that that's one of the things that really you see at work in those kinds of technologies, is this kind of capture and grammatization. And a lot of the time we tend to frame that as academics in, like, there's this sort of legacy of framing these things in very sort of pessimistic terms. And that also exists in Guattari's work. He speaks about machinic enslavement. But there is also this kind of, there's also another aspect, which is quite a bit more, like it was very inspirational to many people, particularly people in the early days of media art. He had this idea of post-media. And I think that had he lived longer, he would have had some sort of thoughts about this kind of stuff that wouldn't have been entirely negative, but would have also seen some sort of positive potentials in there as well. And I think that's maybe part of the weird idea, is that it's like not fully normative, it's kind of open to going in one or another direction.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you have to grab the mic.
Just have to say something about the TikTok. Is TikTok psychedelic? So I think the answer should be no.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. So I would say TikTok, if we think about substances, TikTok is narcotic. So and again, think about durations. It's very fast, and dopamine rush comes in again, and so therefore it would be more kind of a narcotic form of media, and I think there's other, perhaps film can be more psychedelic, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, did I get it right? Patricia Piesters does not need an introduction, which I'm still going to give. She edited this special issue of Deleuze and Guattari Studies, professor of film and media culture at the Department of Media Studies, University of Amsterdam, board member of the Open Foundation, dedicated to advancing psychedelic research, and also proudly guest editor of the issue of the Gids on Psychedelics. Patricia, what is a body without organs?
Okay, yeah, we thought throw in some of the weird concepts of Deleuze and Guattari. They actually developed that together. Deleuze and Guattari talk about the body without organs in several works, and throughout their work also the meaning of the body without organs shifts. But I do think it is in itself, it can be seen as a very psychedelic concept. So what they mean by it, by and large, although it changes, is that the body without organs is a body that is refusing the normative and the normal organization of the body, and they see it as the body without organs. They bring it in to actually liberate desire. And the first time they present it is in their book called Anti-Oedipus, which was sort of the Bible of '68, the counterculture. And they actually argue not against psychoanalysis per se, because they really like this concept of the unconscious and desire, etc. But they argue against the way in which psychoanalysis has a strict format of how our development should function, like the Oedipus complex, that all boys have to like their mother first and then kill their father and then have another. All that, they are really much against that. And so they produce all these kind of concepts like desiring machines and the body without organs. So the body without organs is actually, it's a concept that is derived from or inspired by Anthony Artaud. And here, this is actually Artaud, who proposed this concept in the 1930s. I don't know exactly if it was before or after. I think after he went to Mexico and have his peyote trance experiences. And he felt like that experience when he was for 3 days in Mexico. And he felt these were really the happiest days of his life, because, as you know, Artaud had a very... when he got back after that, he was put in mental hospitals and he was in asylums and in treatments all the time, in and out, and he got shock therapy and all kind of terrible things happened to him. In between, he wrote theater, and he was an avant-garde artist, he was an actor. So he was very, very influential, not alone for Deleuze and Guattari, but for a great many of artists. This concept is developed further on, also in 1,000 Plateaus, where Deleuze and Guattari also speak about different types of bodies with organs. The full body without organs is a liberating organ where you can, they say, sing with your belly, and everything is mixed up and opened, and you can make new connections. That's the main point. Connect, conjugate, So modulate and continue. That's their, slogan. Let's say the tag words of the body without organs. And they also in this they have a whole chapter in 1,000 Plateaus, which is called "How to Make Yourself a Body Without Organs." That's if you want a recipe, go there. Although it's a strange recipe, a weird recipe. But one of the things that they refer to is Castaneda, who is, of course, he was the, let's say, high priest of the counterculture, and he talks about the ways in which Castaneda talks about his psychedelic experiences and how he enters into becoming animals, becoming molecular. These are also ways of creating yourself a body without organs. So it can be created by psychedelics, by all kind of other experiences. In my article, I talk about how cinema, aesthetics can do that. But the concept in itself is highly psychedelic, actually. Even though, it's also even referred to in connection to psychedelics. And it's especially this entering the molecular level where, this is actually relates to what Amir was saying, where you go out of your fixed categories and bodies, but you cannot see it, but you feel all the other energies that are around. That's.
I think it's a beautiful concept and well put. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question, and you decide if you want to talk about it now or after we watch Shaman. This comes back a couple of times throughout the issue. I think it's a quote from Deleuze and Guattari somewhere. And they talk about how psychedelic drugs change the perspectives, but even of non-users. And I find it's a beautiful idea, and when I read it, I believe it, but I have no clue how this could work.
Yeah, I think that this is indeed what they say. They say psychedelics it's important, but especially for the non-users. Yeah. So what they are actually saying is what they try is to open up, also through philosophy, through music, open up our normal concept or even our ideas of knowledge, what knowledge is, and what they hope is that these ideas can have a further life, can contaminate also. Beyond the borders of that substance or that particular experience. So it influencing our thoughts, our ideas, our concept of religion, of healing, of mediation, of what philosophy can bring us in terms of knowledge. So that's why they say it's especially very important for non-users.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Then we're going to put the lights out and we're going to watch a 5.5 minute short video by Colectivo Los Ingravidos. And so please your undivided attention to the screen. Sound. use this as a background. See if that's psychedelic too. Maybe, Erika, because you tipped me with the name of Colectivo Los Engravidos to watch the work. What did you think of this?
I really liked it. I didn't know this work. Actually, didn't know this short film because for now I'm focusing very much on what they work with analogs, mostly 60 millimeters and Super 8, and this is digital. But I really liked it because we don't see. I was really thinking about what do I see right now? What kind of body do I see? I see very much a body without organs. I see, especially when there was the mouth open, I could see flowers and plants and trees, and it was really beautiful and also very hypnotic as well because you have these really strong images with this sound that's really like rhythmic, and then you enter a sort of trance quite literally, and I think this is also part of their work on aesthetics of trance and yeah.
Do you think they used?
I love them.
Do you think they used actual MRI scans for this, or is it drawing, or? We should ask.
It doesn't matter.
Well, maybe it doesn't matter. I wanted to throw a question in the middle. It came back when I read several of your articles, so I don't know, whoever wants to answer. Could there be a role for DIY culture or hacker mentality, similar to the kind of 19th century amateur science in the coming back of like the psychedelic revival against, I think, what you called psychedelic capitalism? Could there be a role for this DIY mentality? That you've seen it in this documentary about mushrooms, for instance, where amateur mushroom seekers actually help science. So what are your thoughts on this?
I grabbed the microphone because I wasn't sure about your question. Like I think when we look at the psychedelic revival, what's happening is actually the opposite of DIY culture. We see the institutionalization of it. We see the normalization, the regularization. So the answer, is there room for DIY culture? Well, there's always been room for DIY culture in the underground, and that will continue to happen. But what's happening now is that before, I think, psychedelics were considered by everybody as part of the underground, and now we see something emerging out of this underground in saying, oh yeah, it's beneficial, it can help you, we have all the data, we have the approval from the FDA, and that is the challenge. So it's not so much about can there be room for DIY, but how should DIY relate to this institutionalization and the medicalization of psychedelics?
Any ideas?
I will give it to everybody.
There's another one. Yeah.
Do you want to answer that?
You're answering it. You have the mic.
Well, I wasn't really going to answer it. I was going to take it in a slightly different direction. I was going to. Do you want
to? Well, I know. No, I think you said the most important thing, that this is the. I mean, this whole psychedelic revival is about finding that new balance, right? Because, of course, psychedelics have been around for hundreds of years, but when we talk about psychedelic revival, we refer to the 60s. And that was the age when, from the 40s, 50s onward, psychedelic was actually used first as in a medical way, and then it became part of the counterculture, and then a lot of things went wrong on many levels, and that people do not want to repeat. So now we have again, it's again the medical profession that takes up first the psychedelics, because they are powerful ways and tools to help people if it's done properly, etc. But a lot of research needs to be done. But at the same time, yes, now what we see is the DIY culture is bigger and growing, and at the same time the institutions. I don't know exactly how that can be solved. It's just something that we have to be wary of, and I don't know, regulation would help a little bit, but then capturing...
Well, I think making like you did in your work, making the link to mediation, to cinema is if that link gets stronger and people realize it's not just medical, it's also aesthetic, that it's not as you cannot simply pinpoint it in one field, might be some suggestion.
Well, I would say the common thread with the DIY and capitalism use of psychedelics is that it's based on the self. Do it yourself or do it for yourself, and self-improvement, self-care, all of that. I think something a way to avoid it perhaps is to go back to the traditions that are using some of those plants, for instance. Those traditions are creating, they're very long and profound traditions sometimes of creating certain set and setting that can help us avoid those pitfalls and reconnect us to things we really miss, reconnection with nature, for instance.
Yeah. So many of the people you talked about, they went to Mexico or the Amazon and had the experiences there. It's impossible to have that experience here because we simply don't have the environment anymore. So how could you... you use the word decolonize psychedelics. I think that's what you're talking about right now. How could we do that and still learn, but in a non-extractive way, from these indigenous knowledges? How is that even possible?
A lot of those traditions come here, and you can find them here as well. Maybe not in the jungle settings or in the deserts of Mexico, but you can find them here, and you can learn from those lines here as well.
And you also said something important, that it's all about the self, but I think one of the things which is also interesting in the videos is that the collective, and that's what you are researching. It's a collective of, it's not one filmmaker with a name, they're a collective, anonymous, and their aim is not to become famous or rich or whatever, but they really want to make work collectively in expressing, a new form of also making art. I think so. That might be one of the ways of, but we cannot really avoid it completely anyway.
No.
Yeah. But another concept of Deleuze and Guattari could come in here or a pair of concepts, which is they talk about all processes in life as being, or the creation of space especially, as being either striated or smooth. And by striated, they mean the capturing machines that you were also referring to, capitalism, any kind of normative, medical, well, that's more ambiguous. It happens all the time. We're captured all the time. At the same time, and always, there are also what they call the smooth. So the smooth and the striated. The smooth is what goes beyond, underneath, between, above, underneath, all these capturing machines, which also happens all the time. So that might be a way of just philosophically understanding what's going on, not giving a solution. I don't think it's either one or the other. And also even Deleuze and Guattari say maybe they need each other as well. So it's not like, oh, smooth is all good. No, sometimes we need some striation and the other way around.
Okay. Couple of questions. I really want to get this out of the way for Amir. So you talk about the spiritual channeling machine of Vincent Moon, his work. I was reminded of the history of spirit photography, the magic lantern, and in many technological advancements in creating art, you would see that people use these media for channeling spirits, for picturing spirits. Looking back, you can see that was just some kind of tricky way to use the medium. How do you know that that's not also the case with Vincent Moon currently?
Well, I cannot prove it, of course. And he is very careful of actually saying anything like that.
Yeah.
But again, if you... Within our culture at this time, to think about channeling spirits would be a very difficult thing to say. But if you think about it through Deleuzian, Bergsonian philosophy, then if it's just about tapping into other durations, for example, then it's a different story. And then you can almost prove it.
Yeah, but I think it's actually out there, like maybe not in academia, but you hear people talking about this. And also when we talk about epistemologies, different worldviews clashing. It doesn't have to be between indigenous, and here it's also happening right before our eyes. So maybe these things can also happen, or can also help, these kind of tools of bridging these gaps.
Yeah, I think one of the things Deleuze and Guattari are doing is kind of connecting almost pre-modern way of thinking with, if you like, the postmodern or the contemporary. So they can form interesting bridges.
So what kind of spirits is he channeling, Moon?
Many different kinds. Eventually the whole world, as Patricia said. So he's traveling around the world and capturing...
It's also up to the viewer, probably.
And it's also up to the viewer and the specific set and settings of each and every live cinema event he's making.
Can I say something of an experience that I had? I've participated in several Vincent Moon performances, and I remember one that you organized in The Hague, where he starts. So what he's doing, he travels indeed the world, and he is filming really as a participant all kind of songs, rituals, sometimes explicitly psychedelic rituals, but sometimes it's also just the music or a voice that really puts you, and it's very, very touching. And what he does is he makes live performances where he remixes all these clips that he filmed, and they're all online. It's all open source, and he gives it back to the world. So it is a sort of ritual that you enter, that he presents, and then at one of the presentations, he started by explaining that how he started doing this was because he was interested in visiting music festivals, and he was always so struck by the energy of these festivals. And what he wanted to do was then somehow give back that energy. So he films and then throwing out back also the energy of what he filmed. And it was so powerful with some ritual gestures that he was actually making that much more tangible. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. Maybe people don't know Vincent Moon and what he does, but he performs live cinema and he travels indeed. It's from everywhere in the world, and it's always really very beautiful. And he's never filming; he's part of it. So, and that's what's the amazing thing of it. So.
Yeah, I would like to participate in one. You said you participated in one, so you were really not just a viewer, but you're in the ritual. Yeah. Thanks for explaining, because I think most people didn't really know it probably, so we needed that.
I also, I'm not sure I'm going to formulate this. It's also a bit of a personal experience relating to Moon and to psychedelics, and also, I mean, for me, this venture has also led me to think of psychedelics through the concept of media, and I was also always struck by how extremely vividly, visually cinematic psychedelic experience can be, even to an extent that the crispness of images can go beyond anything you've ever seen in real life. But the weird thing with that is often there's this discussion also in mysticism studies, like, is this like coming from some sort of subconscious or something shared or something that you've seen before, the sort of cultural bias. And I'm always amazed by how new these images are, or how I've never seen anything like it before. So then the question, of course, is like, to what extent and for what are psychedelics a medium, right? Because that's what then comes to the table. Is it did somebody produce it? Did somebody use it as a medium? So what is being mediated, and why are these images so extremely can be so extremely vivid?
Yeah. So this is going to continue for a little while, but at some point we're going to open it up. So I would like you to already think about formulative question, perhaps, if you have them. Maybe, Mark, you could say something about the danger of what you call microfascism.
Okay. I'll also jump in first with what I was going to offer as the kind of intervention on the previous point.
Good.
About, excuse me. the institutionalization of psychedelia. I think I'm reading a very interesting book right now. It's called Tripping on Utopia. I think the author's name is Breer. And it's kind of like a history of this, the sort of previous, before there was the psychedelic moment, there was actually already an institutionalized moment of these drugs that lasted, and they really reached its sort of apex in the mid-50s, sort of started in the late 40s. And then this kind of the famous split happens between, like, on the one hand you have like Leary, on the other hand you have Osmond, who came up with the term psychedelics. And the difference of opinions there was that it should be only for the elite, but not capitalism, but for basically the university professors and sort of people like that.
So you guys.
People who could, in this vision, it was like people who could sort of handle it. And this was how Aldous Huxley sort of saw it in his books on the topic. And they were quite upset with Timothy Leary for taking it off in a different direction. So there was this really interesting kind of prehistory, which is a different kind of institutionalization. And I think that's really interesting to think about now too, especially in the context of what you had asked before about the question, the question that you had asked before about whether we would be studying these things. I don't know how you do that, eh?
Like not study them, but use them for study.
Yeah. There's also a really interesting aspect in that history that connects sort of to my field, where the sort of early conferences in cybernetics, which are sort of considered to be the beginning of the field, many fields, but including the field of new media, but also and computation, but also sort of cognitive neuroscience and so forth, that they were kind of wrapped up in this moment, this kind of early psychedelic moment, and then there's a sort of disturbing aspect to that too, where the CIA were funding all kinds of weird stuff. They were funding the Paris Review. They were funding, and they were also funding these kinds of discussions, and that turned into a very dark moment in the history of experimental psychology, the MK Ultra experiments. So I don't know exactly what you take from all of that, but there is at least an interesting sort of prehistory before the countercultural history, where there's quite a number of interesting paths there. And one of the points that this author makes in this book is that it could have been very different if big pharma didn't kind of come along, and maybe we can get some glimpse of that from looking back to that history. You had asked me a different question, though.
Yeah, I wanted you to go towards. You mentioned the dark side. You mentioned microfascism, and you mentioned it in relation to, I think, DIY tripping. Yeah. So, in the article, there's a lot of things going on in the article. One of the things is the moment in Thousand Plateaus where they're like readers of Carlos Castaneda, and they're actually kind of, I think they sort of misread Carlos Castaneda, but that's okay because they say that at the beginning of the book that's what they're going to do. And they in Castaneda's Don Juan, he sort of lays out, or at least Don Juan lays out to him, Don Juan in the sense that it's this kind of amalgamation of insights that he's received and then turns it into Don Juan. Speaks about these sort of the dangers on the path to esoteric enlightenment, and some of those are very interesting dangers. Power, yeah. The one that I think is the most sort of kind of mic droppy is clarity. Yeah. Because that's not, you don't usually think of that in those terms, but I think it is a very interesting point. How is that a danger? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you begin to think that you see the truth. You begin to see the way that things really are, and that can be quite dangerous. And I think we see like a lot of evidence of that at this moment in time in media, you know, with all the kind of attention to conspiracy theories and so forth. Yeah. But the microfascism thing is actually part of their misreading of Castaneda. So he speaks of one of the dangers, the last danger for him is just like the fear of death, that you're going to die, and you realize that, and that's really frightening and overwhelming. And but they read it on a much grander scale. They call death the great disgust, and then they speak about the last moments of the Nazi regime as it's crumbling, that's where they introduce this, one of the places where they introduce this concept of micro-fascism. And in the text, I'm like, well, if they're going to misread Castaneda, then I will misread them. But I actually think there's something interesting in that idea of disgust as being a kind of an affect that, if it sort of scales, kind of becomes a sort of the basis of a fascist way of life. So that was the point that I tried to make there.
Yeah. Well, thinking about disgust, if you look at it very and anthropologically, I always say, like, well, an ayahuasca night is no more than 20 people in the room who like to spend their Saturday nights puking together, right? I mean, it is a very basic level. We always think about these sort of high spiritual gains, but a lot of people also who I speak from an anthropological perspective, why do you do it? Why do you continue to go and then have all these ideas or these big concepts? But the core of the matter is they just meet each other every Saturday night and they drink this and then they puke together, right? That's what's really going on. And that a lot of people don't like ayahuasca because of that sort of purging thing. And other people give to the purging actually a lot of significance, saying, well, you actually need the purging. To a certain extent, I think both are wrong. It's just something which happens with ayahuasca, and you have to take it with it, right? And that's what's happening as well. But if you want to go for purity, and then you're back with purity, well, then you take acid or you take LSD, because that is...
Or DMT.
Or you smoke DMT. Ayahuasca is DMT, but you would take it in a different way and then get to the purity. But it's interesting because there you get the purging, the whole idea that there's something which needs to be purified even, right? Which is back to this whole story of going to enlightenment, going to a higher pure state, which has been a very destructive idea of human thought, that things need to be purified, right? And it's interesting how in ayahuasca practice that is we're so viscerally reminded of that, because everything is about the puking and the diarrhea, which can happen, doesn't happen to everybody. I don't know what that means, but...
Mic drop. Are there questions in the audience? There is a mic running towards you. Sorry for this pars pro toto.
I have a question, probably Dan Oostveen, maybe he can answer this, because he is a religious study scholar, about the compatibility of academia and psychedelics, because my experiences always have been with psychedelics that I think I understand something of the world, even though it's little, and then it all gets smashed to bits once I take psychedelics. So is this even possible?
What does that have to do with religion?
Maybe because you study religion, maybe that's also not compatible with academia. But
I mean, two things to say is there are different regimes of knowledge, right? And that's fine. And so that's one thing I can say about it. The other thing is that there is a moment happening now, not only in the psychedelic revival, but also with the psychedelic humanities, which you are witnessing here on the stage, right? Which is basically what we are doing, is reflecting on psychedelics as an academic phenomenon. So we are showing that it can be done. Is it useful? Is it helpful? I don't know. I mean, you tell me, right? But yeah, so in that sense, there is a compatibility. People have now acknowledged, people with professorships have acknowledged that this is something that we can look at seriously. We're not afraid that it stains us. But of course, there's a question of legality there. And it seems that the academic regime of knowledge can also produce things related to psychedelics. And then maybe to finish up, is your sort of question more from anecdotal, like, oh, I grabbed the truth, right? Is that knowledge, right? So is the feeling to have the truth? I mean, the joke about like hospitals being full of people thinking they're Jesus Christ or that they got the truth, you know, the sort of truth regime or the idea of truth. Question anyway is whether science has anything to do with truth, but that's a philosophical question. Apparently there's an effect, I would like rephrase it, there's an effect of truth finding that occurs in many users of psychedelics. Still, if you ask people like what were the most significant experiences in your life, like if people use psychedelics, it's very likely, this is I got from science, that their psychedelic experience will be in their top 5, like together with having their child born, right? So that's, I don't know what to make of it, but it's a statistical fact, right? So apparently something is grasped, but I would say that's a completely different order. And that in that sense, the religion analogy makes maybe sense. But there's still also possibilities for cross-pollination of these epistemologies. And that's, I think, is when it gets really interesting.
Please.
Yeah, I can maybe just add that this is one of the things that makes the work of Deleuze and Guattari so interesting, because as philosophers, they are actually proposing these weird concepts that in normal academia, what is that? Okay, are not really accepted. In a lot of, I mean, Deleuze and Guattari, it's always, people always start to giggle or smile when you mention it. And even in a grant proposal, I would never use Deleuze and Guattari, because they are, as philosophers, somehow proposing concepts that go beyond our, you know, of what we, the standard, or what standard, the idea of a truth or how we have organized life. And in that sense, from a humanities perspective, maybe it's different in the hard science, although they also study psychedelics, but there they really want to know, you know, looking at the MRI scan, what happens, what areas of the brain are lighting up. And that's a different type of knowledge than in the humanities we can think of concepts of how do we relate to the world, how can we become planned or, you know, think differently. So I think it's I would say the psychedelic humanities or the humanities are a bit freer maybe in exploring those.
There's questions over there, but maybe first, in adding to this, I was wondering, you say Deleuze and Guattari do not mention psychedelics explicitly very much, but they maybe do on one or two occasions. When do they do it?
They never talk about their own experiences, not with psychedelics, but Deleuze does talk a lot. He had an alcohol problem, and he does talk about drinking. So there is a very nice abécédaire online where for each letter of the alphabet he was given a word. And he talks about it, and the B is for boire, drinking, and he talks about alcoholism and delirium, and so he does. Yeah, he did address that very explicitly. But otherwise, they talk about Castaneda or about the drug addict, or you know, so they do address it, well, directly, but not from a phenomenological experience, at least not directly saying. When we were there, we were taking this kind of... That they don't do.
I see two questions over there.
I wanted to add a little bit to the point. A friend of mine, Ruben Laukone, he's a neuroscientist who recently moved to Australia. He used to do this postdoc here, but he did brain research on meditation and epiphanic delirium, kind of like so. He gave people the experience that they found some profound truth by provoking this brain region and thereby associating people a feeling of truthiness to a certain percept, tricking themselves by having this epiphanic experience. They overloaded a certain concept with too much truth experience. But I think with psychedelics, in a way, you could be in a bit more like disequilibrium, where it could go both ways, where you could have like a vision that either breaks or constructs this grand vision that can then alter your perception permanently in a way, like either break it or give you this impetus for this grand virtual kind of thing. And this is, I think, maybe relevant to the Deleuzian way of thinking of like this whole body without organs and agency that is in this molecule or in like a chair or a car that like all have the capacity to radically change the way space is created and how we can also destroy boundaries and make new ones. And I think their experience is way more ambiguous, and I think we're distracted by this monolithic, neutral, objective idea of truth that is somehow non-agentic at all, but neutral and just like this thing out there that is by itself in a way, instead of this grand dance or something.
You don't end to a question. Do you want to respond, or?
Yeah, it was like a kind of like a provocation and like kind of like adding.
You said truthiness. Isn't that a Colbertian concept?
A Colbertian?
Yeah, I just made that up.
Yeah.
The word truthiness, where does it come from?
I think I don't remember. It is some philosopher that has this.
I think it was a comic.
No, it might be Trump actually, or concerning Trump.
I think it was Stephen Colbert talking about Trump. So maybe I can end your rant by turning it into a question, saying, is there a relation between Deleuzian and Trumpian? Maybe to Patricia or Mark.
Well, yeah, I mean, Deleuze is full of concepts that are also, it's not all good, you know, and you can have indeed the fascist body, you can have the body without organs that collapses and enters into a black hole. So there is the idea of microfascism. So it's not that Deleuze and Guattari offer all these beautiful world kind of utopian concepts. No, it's really about how things can go wrong as well. So I do think, yes, Trump, you could address him from a Deleuzian perspective, but maybe not from the chapter in 1,000 Plateaus about becoming animal, maybe, but from a chapter called The Machines of Capture, and that is about how, you know, we need also some fixed structures to hold on to, or it's part of our world. So yeah, I would not like to write it myself, but it is possible. I think.
I think Trump is actually mentioned in Deleuze and Guattari. I think correct me if I'm wrong.
In Guattari. In the Three Ecologies, Guattari mentions Trump written in 1987. And he mentions Trump already, but as an example of microfascism that can grow and grow and grow. And he talks about the different ecologies also of our minds. You know, it's ecology of nature, ecology of politics and social culture, but also ecologies of mind. And then he says, you know, we have to be careful. If you let something grow there, it will also infect our thoughts. And he refers to Trump. The first time I read that was like, what?
Yeah. That's prophetic.
Wow.
Mark. Okay, sorry. Oh, there are many questions, and there too. Okay, good. Yeah.
Well, it's surprising that with all these film scholars, nobody talked about virtual reality. And Jan Koenen was mentioned, and his Ayahuasca, The Cosmic Journey, which at Doc Lab I assisted showing, and of all those people, it was sold out. None of them, or maybe 0.1%, had an ayahuasca experience, but for them it was the ayahuasca experience, and having done both, it's not the ayahuasca experience. So in terms of immersion, and also Vincent Moon and Petit Planet, I know that work, and he's very good, but in terms of virtual reality, you can go beyond. In the becoming, you go beyond the subject-object divide. So why hasn't anybody touched on this?
Good question.
I'm very happy you mentioned the virtual reality experience. I wanted to throw that in, the one who made Blueberry, and the ayahuasca, he calls himself cinematographer ayahuasquera.
Yeah.
And he did indeed make a virtual reality experience. So thank you for mentioning it. I think it is also interesting to think about the differences. There are still differences between an actual psychedelic experience and a virtual reality experience. We haven't addressed this. No, not all authors. There are a few authors who are not here present, but they also did not address this. But we hope this is a beginning of further reflection. But maybe you wanted to.
I think maybe we should have questions.
Yeah, there were quite a few questions over there also.
Some, because there's only 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have like five-ish minutes. Maybe how do you group questions?
Well, just have three, like one, two. I saw 3 hands. Shall we just have the 3 hands without us responding?
Excellent suggestion.
Yeah, is it okay?
So should I just ask the question?
Yeah.
Just like for the okay.
Well,
I'm still trying to formulate this as I'm speaking, but bear with me.
Yeah.
One concept that for me really stayed with me in Deleuze and Guattari's philosophy was the rhizome. And I think this really closely correlates with the psychedelic experience in the sense that you, like, other experiences you can look at as, like a tree, your daily experiences, and you can kind of compartmentalize them very easily. And therefore you can also study them in academia. And you can kind of make sense of them and have a common language that you speak of, or that you use to communicate to other people, how that works or how this concept works or whatever. But with psychedelics, I feel like it's always very ineffable. And then I'm wondering, as someone who wants to bring them further into academia, what do you guys think about how to expand our mediums or media of communication about psychedelics? Because we can study film in academia, and we can study all these mediums in academia using language and using academic language. But I think my question then would be, how can we introduce, or how can we impose upon academia to also expand itself to contain other media that can actually more properly be used to communicate about the psychedelic experience, that still respect the subjectivity and the intricacy of those experiences?
Thanks.
That was one. We're going to do 3, right? This experiment.
I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you all for the discussion. I think Frank made a good. I think Frank, right? Is your name, or did
Mark?
Mark. Sorry. It's been a long night. Your point about the more sinister prehistory of psychedelics, I think, was very interesting and pertinent. And also, my question is: there's with psychedelic revival, you also get something like religious revival, it turns kind of atheists into believers often. But I've noticed at least that there's always a same kind of religiosity that is shamanistic or pantheistic. And I was wondering, especially from the people who are more into religion, is there also a role for psychedelics in monotheism? Is there some historical thing that I don't know about relating to Christianity or Islam where psychedelics apply?
Good question. Yeah, good question. One more?
Hi. So my question is regards both religion and the assumption of drugs. I was feeling, meanwhile you were talking about religion and this sort of hailing to God in a certain sense, that is this the kind of experience we are looking for? Meanwhile, we are using these psychedelics tools, or actually my question is referring more to narcotics, drugs, alcohol or weed, grass, but I think that the discourse could be attached also to psychedelics tools. What sense does it make for us as bodies without organs in this big, unique, immanent plan to look for something that is supposed to be transcendental? So it's something attached to religion. Is it possible a religion in an immanent field, in a unique immanent field? And how would you describe it?
This one's for you.
I can talk 20 minutes about this,
but after
I cannot do that. So talk to me in break. I mean, all three. I try to connect all three questions. I think we've been talking about the immanent as well, and I think that's what Deleuze and Guattari bring to the table. We always want, as religious studies scholars, we always think of as the transcendent, the thing beyond, and everybody with psychedelic, this beyond. Yeah, the rhizome is a great concept, and yes, there is connections which are immanentives, and that's what Deleuze and Guattari bring to the table. Let's leave it at that because we don't have much time, and give other.
The monotheistic question.
Yeah, the monotheistic. I mean, a simple answer would be yes. Santo Daime is a Christian ayahuasca group where they really they use ayahuasca as a work to honor the Virgin Mary, etc., etc. So yeah, definitely.
I would say Santo Daime is a polytheistic with strong Christian elements. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a syncretic tradition. Catholicism is
also polytheistic.
True. There's no monotheism actually. But also, I would refer your question to interesting books by Benny Shannon, who actually connects, and articles that actually connects monotheistic traditions to the use of psychedelics. Benny Shannon.
Biblical Entheogens, 2008.
Thank you.
History and etc.
And the first question, who wants to answer that?
The rhizomes super relevant for us, and a good link with psychedelics. Obviously, I think it's a great concept, very useful.
Yeah, I said already. So the rhizome was a. Is this still on?
Just turn it on.
A very popular concept in the sort of early heyday of the field of new media theory. But it's a great concept. But there's also, none of these things are sort of meant to sort of replace the things that they're set up in contrast to. I think that's also important to bear in mind. There's one, maybe others here will remember the quote better than me, but one of the things they say is at one point, I think maybe even in that chapter, is that it's important to hang on to enough of the organism to be able to reconstitute at dawn. Mm-hmm. So if you just take the line of flight and completely go with these sort of rhizomatic molecular disintegration, that's also not the objective. That I think the other on the monotheistic thing, I think also the Native American Church in its original formulation was monotheistic as well.
If that answers your question, then I think we're going to leave it at that. Yeah. Last clip? Yeah. Thank you very much to the panel members. Daan, Amir, Erika, Patricia, Mark. Thank you, Tomme.
Okay, so you can all have free access to the journal. You can either copy that, or there are some tokens at the exit, and there are a few copies, hard copies, if they are for sale. But everybody can have free access, and we will show one last clip. You can leave, but the clip we want to show is another moment from the Patti Smith and homage to Artaud. So it's really her, It's called Ivry, and but you can leave. Don't feel obliged to stay for this. We just play it, and you can leave whenever you want to leave. Okay. Yeah.
In a room like any other, in a room like no other, in this solitary cell, clouded with light, sitting straight at his length, burgeoning flame, a flower, the principle within the hollow, the excrement of divine sorrow. In a room like any other, in a room like no other, in the twisted sheets, his hands are vines, climbing unseen, forming shadows, rituals unknown, and through him reborn. In our bright pavilion, dawn is spreading at the foot of the bed, the comic foot, white bars of light in the solitary cell, no film that flickers, no mirrors at all. Stillness, with his hands folded on this lovely morning, oh, this lovely journey, ritual shadows form, reform, circle the room, born, reborn. In the joyous dead of night, his words revive, sons of the dead, the cross and the sword, the unholy mother, gather together in a room like any other. His hands like vines, climbs, glories twisting, and like staining the dangling feet, where he sits asleep, with his eyes wide open. Awake, comic foot, one step, then another, past the green chair, past an image of him, inhaling deeply, exhaling smoke, shrouding the room like any other. Slowly he goes from the room like any other, toward the mountain in Mexico, where the soul quakes, where the heart aches. To Mexico, our sleeping friend, so scorned, adorned, one step then another from the solitary cell.